The first day in the house should have been thrilling. A fresh start in a new city, a chance to rebuild from the wreckage of the past, a blank canvas where I could finally repaint my life. But from the moment I pulled up to Ashgrove Lane, something felt off. The street was almost unnervingly quiet. Occasional barks from distant dogs echoed across the empty asphalt, mixing with the faint rumble of a train far off in the night. The wind whispered through the bare branches of winter trees, brushing against the sidewalks in soft, skeletal fingers. The house itself looked ordinary at first glance. Red brick, 2 stories, narrow windows that caught the late afternoon light just enough to glint. Nothing about it screamed danger. Nothing that should have set off alarm bells, and yet I felt the prickling unease crawl across my skin, tiny, invisible hairs standing on end. The front door creaked in my hands as I stepped inside. Immediately, I noticed a coldness that wasn't just the chill of an empty house. It was sharp, precise, like a knife's edge sliding across the nape of my neck. The air smelled faintly of dust and old plaster, but there was something underneath, something almost alive, almost waiting. I shook it off. I had always been sensitive to my surroundings. Sensitive to energies, moods, even the faintest shifts in light or air. And lately, everything had been magnified: the divorce, the late nights alone, the gnawing loneliness that stretched from one sleepless morning to the next. Maybe this was just me projecting, I told myself. I unpacked in a flurry, moving boxes from the car into the kitchen and living room, arranging furniture, trying desperately to make the place mine. Every sound I made seemed to echo back at me, louder than it should have, bouncing off the walls in long, drawn-out reverberations. As evening fell, the silence became heavier, almost suffocating. That's when I noticed it for the first time. The house didn't creak, not in the way old houses usually do. No soft groans of settling wood, no faint drip from a leaky pipe, nothing but quiet, a quiet that seemed to press against my ears, against my skull, making it hard to breathe. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to do the same. I tried to distract myself, turning on lamps and moving through each room, pretending it was just an old house and my imagination. Even as I laughed at myself, even as I poured a glass of wine in the kitchen, I felt it tiny, fleeting, like a shadow brushing past the corner of my vision. And then, just as I turned off the lights and climbed into bed, I heard it, a whisper. So faint that at first I thought it was the wind, a sigh slipping through the cracked window frame, but it wasn't. It was a name, my name. I froze and my heart jumped, every muscle in my body screaming to run, to escape. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky. Only silence answered me. The night stretched on, the shadows growing longer, twisting into shapes that my mind shouldn't have been able to see. I didn't sleep. I lay in the darkness, listening, straining to hear anything else, anything at all. But there was only the quiet, and a feeling of presence watching me from just beyond the edges of my room. The first night, I woke at exactly 3:12 a.m. At first, I didn't know why I was awake. There was no nightmare clinging to my thoughts, no sudden jolt of panic. Just a quiet awareness, like someone had gently tapped the inside of my skull and whispered, "Wake up." Then I heard it, a soft voice, familiar, intimate. Daniel. It wasn't loud. It didn't echo. It didn't sound angry or threatening. That made it worse. It sounded like someone standing inches away from me, close enough that I should have felt their breath. The voice came from the wall beside my bed, not through it, from it. My body locked up instantly, my fingers curled into the sheets, gripping the fabric so tightly my knuckles ached. My heart began pounding, not racing, but thudding slow and heavy, as if my body was bracing for something it didn't want to understand. I stared at the wall, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. Moonlight leaked through the blinds, casting pale stripes across the peeling paint. Nothing moved, nothing changed. "Daniel," the voice whispered again. This time, it sounded closer. I squeezed my eyes shut, shaking my head slightly. "You're dreaming," I told myself. "This is just one of those half-awake moments. The kind where your brain plays tricks on you." Sleep paralysis, stress, exhaustion. I forced myself to sit up and grabbed my phone from the nightstand. The screen lit up the room with a harsh glow. 3:12 a.m. exactly, not 3:11, not 3:13. The timing sent a cold ripple through my chest. To precise, to clean, dreams don't usually care about numbers like that. I swallowed hard and scanned the room again. The shadows clung to the corners, unmoving. The door was closed, just the way I'd left it. The house was silent and naturally so, no hum of appliances, no ticking clock. Not even the distant train I'd heard earlier that evening. I waited, seconds stretched into minutes. Nothing happened. Eventually, my rational mind clawed its way back in. Old houses make noises, I told myself. Pipes shift, walls expand and contract. And when you're alone, your brain fills in the gaps. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, every nerve ending buzzing. My eyes burned with exhaustion, but sleep refused to come. Each time I started to drift off, I felt that sensation of being watched, of something leaning closer, just out of sight. At some point, I must have slept. Morning light pulled me back into consciousness, dull and grey. For a brief, comforting moment, the fear felt ridiculous. Daylight always does that, makes the night seem foolish, exaggerated, until I noticed the wall. Right beside my bed, etched faintly into the paint, were shallow grooves, thin lines, almost like fingernail marks. They hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. I ran my fingers over them. The paint was chipped. Beneath it, the plaster felt rough and warm. That night, I left the light on. And at 3:12 a.m., the house breathed again. By the second night, there was no mistaking it. The voice was louder, clearer, closer. I woke again before it spoke, my body instinctively snapping into awareness as if some ancient part of me knew what time it was without looking. My eyes flew open, heart already pounding, breath shallow and tight in my chest. Then, Daniel, the sound rolled out of the wall beside my bed, smooth and unmistakable. My blood ran cold. I knew that voice, not just recognized it, remembered it. Every subtle inflection, every gentle rise and fall. The warmth hidden beneath the softness. My mother's voice, she had been gone for 3 years. I sat up so fast the mattress creaked beneath me. The room felt smaller somehow, as if the walls had shifted inward while I slept. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out everything else. "Mom," the word slipped out before I could stop it. The silence that followed was unbearable, no answer, no whisper, no movement. I stared at the wall, half expecting it to split open, to reveal something waiting inside. But it remained solid, unbroken, innocent. The moonlight traced faint cracks across its surface, like veins just beneath the skin. Grief surged through me, hot, sharp, disorienting. My mind scrambled for explanations, stress, memory, trauma resurfacing. Anything that didn't end with the truth clawing its way forward. But deep down, I knew this wasn't memory, it was imitation. The feeling in the room changed, it thickened, became charged, like the air right before a storm. I could feel it pressing against me, studying me, listening. Something in the walls knew me. Not just my name. I reached for my phone with trembling hands. If I could just record it, capture even a second of sound, I could prove I wasn't losing my mind. The camera app opened, its red recording light blinking softly in the dark. I held the phone toward the wall. "Say it again," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Seconds passed, then minutes. My arm ached from holding the phone steady. Sweat trickled down my spine, my eyes burned, refusing to blink. Nothing. Finally, I lowered the phone and stopped the recording. My hands shook as I played it back. Silence, not even static. Not even the faint background noise you'd expect from an old house at night. Just emptiness. My stomach dropped. I checked the time. 3:12 a.m. again, the same minute, the same second. Every rational defense I'd built began to crumble. Hallucinations don't follow schedules, grief doesn't knock on walls. And memories don't wait for the exact same moment every night. I didn't sleep after that. I sat against the headboard, lights on, my eyes fixed on the wall until dawn crept through the blinds. When morning finally came, I felt hollowed out, like something had taken a piece of me and retreated back into the house. As I stood up to leave the bedroom, I noticed something new. The grooves in the wall had deepened. They weren't random anymore, they formed letters, my name. Carved slowly, patiently, from the inside out. Sleep stopped being rest, it became another room in the house, one I couldn't leave. At first, the dreams came in fragments, brief flashes of pressure, of darkness, of something unseen closing in. But within days, they stretched longer, heavier, more vivid. I wasn't just dreaming about the house anymore, I was dreaming from inside its walls. In these dreams, I was a silent observer, trapped within the plaster and wood, looking out into my own bedroom. I saw myself sleeping, a pale figure in the dim light, vulnerable and unaware. The perspective was chillingly intimate. I could see the tiny details of the room, the dust motes dancing in the moonlight, the rise and fall of my own chest as I breathed. From my prison within the walls, I could feel a low hum, a vibration that resonated through my dream self. It was an ancient, patient consciousness, and it was watching me through my own eyes. Each night, the dreams grew bolder. I started seeing other things through the walls, not just my bedroom, but other rooms, other times. Glimpses of the houses past flickered by. A family celebrating a birthday, their laughter muffled and distant. A woman weeping in the kitchen, her sorrow seeping into the very foundation. An old man dying in the study, his last breath a whisper against the wallpaper. I was a witness to every secret the house had ever kept. The presence wasn't just haunting my house, it was the house, and it was showing me its memories, its life, its collection of souls. The worst part was the feeling that came with it, a cold, possessive curiosity. It wasn't just showing me its past. It was studying me, learning me, deciding where I would fit into its collection. Sleep became a nightly surrender, and I knew, with a certainty that froze my blood, that one of these nights I wouldn't wake up. I would simply become another memory trapped within the walls. If you like this story, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Thanks for watching. Every time I closed my eyes, the house followed me. I dreamed I was standing in my bedroom, exactly as it was. Same cracked ceiling, same peeling paint. Same faint smell of dust and something older beneath it, but the room was shrinking. The walls leaned inward, inch by inch, silent and deliberate. I tried to step back, there was nowhere to go. The plaster pressed against my chest, cold and damp, my arms were pinned to my sides. I could feel the grain of the wood above me, rough against my scalp. I was being flattened slowly, carefully, like something was trying to mold me into the shape of the house itself. Then I felt it scratching, not on the surface, behind the wall. Something moved just inches from my face, separated only by a thin layer of plaster. I couldn't see it, but I could feel its presence, alive, restless, aware of me. Its movements were cautious, curious. Like fingers tracing my outline from the other side. I tried to scream, no sound came out. My mouth opened wide, jaw straining, throat burning, but the walls swallowed every attempt. The scratching grew faster, more excited. Whatever it was, it knew I was awake inside the dream. I woke up choking. My heart slammed against my ribs, breath tearing out of me in ragged gasps. The sheets were twisted tight around my legs, damp with sweat. My jaw ached. When I wiped my mouth, my fingers came away red blood. I didn't remember biting my tongue. I didn't remember grinding my teeth. It happened again the next night. And the night after that, each dream went deeper. The walls didn't just press against me anymore, they opened. I felt myself being pulled inside them, layers of my body peeling away like old wallpaper. I could hear voices murmuring from within the plaster. Familiar voices, intimate ones, my mother, my ex-wife. Old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. They spoke softly, lovingly, coaxing me closer, telling me it was safe, telling me I belonged there. When I woke, hours felt wrong, time slipped sideways. Mornings blurred into afternoons. I forgot to eat, forgot to return calls. The world outside Ashgrove Lane began to feel unreal, like something I'd imagined once and then abandoned. The house, however, was always clear. I began catching myself standing still for long stretches of time, fingers pressed against the walls, listening. Sometimes I swore I could feel a faint vibration beneath the surface, like a pulse, like a heartbeat. Something's wrong with this house, it started subtly. A floorboard creaking upstairs when I was home alone. The faint sound of a music box, always from the same corner of the attic. I'd brush it off, telling myself it was just an old house settling, but then things got worse. My keys would disappear from the hook by the door, only to turn up inside the locked medicine cabinet. The TV would switch on by itself, always to a static-filled channel. One night, I woke up to a child's laughter echoing from the hallway. My blood ran cold. That was it. I had to talk to the landlord. He was an old, reclusive man who lived just down the street. When I told him about the noises, the moving objects, the laughter, he just stared at me with these hollow, tired eyes. He didn't seem surprised at all. He just sighed and said, "I was hoping you wouldn't notice so soon." He led me to his own cluttered basement and pulled a dusty photo album from a shelf. He opened it to a page with a faded picture of a smiling family. "That's the Miller family," he said, his voice trembling. "They lived in your house before you. They had a little girl, Emily." He pointed to the small, bright-eyed girl in the photo. She loved playing hide and seek. One day, she hid in an old trunk in the attic. The lid latched shut. They didn't find her in time. My heart hammered against my ribs. The music box, the laughter, it was her. The landlord looked up at me, his face etched with a grief so profound it was almost terrifying. "They say she's still playing," he whispered. "Still waiting for someone to find her." He then pointed to the couple in the photo. "I'm their son," he said, his voice breaking. "That was my family and Emily. Emily was my little sister." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. He wasn't just my landlord. He was the sole survivor of the tragedy that haunted my home, living just steps away, trapped in the echo of his family's last moments. I went back to the house that night, but it wasn't just a house anymore. It was a tomb, and I realized the ghost wasn't the only one trapped there. He was too. Thanks for watching. By the time I returned to the house, the daylight did nothing to soothe me. The walls of Ashgrove Lane loomed over me like silent sentinels, waiting. I realized I wasn't just living in the house, I was part of it now. And every tick of the clock brought me closer to 3:12 a.m., closer to the moment when the walls would speak again. That night, I stayed awake, watching, waiting, knowing, deep in my bones, that ignoring it wasn't an option. The house had rules, I had broken them, and I was about to find out what that meant. I stopped leaving the house without deciding to. One day, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd stepped outside. The idea of it felt distant, unreal, like a memory from someone else's life. The house no longer felt like a place I lived in. It felt like the only place that existed. The voice began calling during the day. At first, it was faint, almost imperceptible. A soft vibration beneath the noise of my thoughts, Daniel. I would freeze mid-step, heart skipping, breath caught halfway in my chest. I'd press my palm against the wall, listening. The plaster felt warmer than it should have, alive. The walls seemed to breathe. Not visibly, but I could feel it, a slow expansion and contraction, like lungs filling with air. Shadows shifted in corners I didn't remember noticing before, stretching farther than the light allowed. Mirrors became unreliable. When I brushed my teeth, my reflection lagged behind me just a fraction of a second too slow. When I lifted my hand, it hesitated before following. I stopped looking at myself altogether. My phone buzzed with calls I didn't answer. Messages piled up unanswered. Friends stopped checking in. The world beyond the walls faded quietly, politely, as if it knew it wasn't welcome anymore. My life shrank until the house was everything. The cracks appeared gradually. At first, they were hairline fractures in the plaster-thin, branching lines like veins beneath skin. I told myself it was structural damage, age, moisture. The cracks appeared gradually. At first, they were hairline fractures in the plaster-thin, branching lines like veins beneath skin. I told myself it was structural damage, age, moisture. Then they widened. I pressed my fingers against one of them. It was warm, not just room temperature, not heat from pipes, warm like skin. I pulled my hand back sharply, breath hitching. The wall pulsed once beneath my touch, slow, deliberate. I didn't know if it was the house changing or me. At night, I heard movement inside the walls. Not mice and not rats, something heavier, something that paused when I listened. Objects began to move, small things at first. My keys appearing on the kitchen counter when I knew I'd left them by the door. A book sliding off the shelf when no one was near it. Then bigger things, chairs shifted positions while I slept. Doors slammed shut on their own. Once, I watched the hallway door close slowly, carefully, as if guided by an invisible hand. And always, at 3:12 a.m., The voices returned. They weren't singular anymore. They layered over each other, multiple tones. Multiple mouths, men, women, children, all saying the same thing, my name. Days lost their meaning. Weeks blurred together until I wasn't sure how long I'd been inside the house. Time no longer moved forward, it circled, repeated. Only 3:12 a.m. remained real. Everything else was fog. Through the widening cracks in the walls, I began to see things, shadows, figures pressed just beneath the surface, their outlines distorted by plaster and wood, faces without features. Hands reaching but never breaking through, they watched me. Sometimes they beckoned, silently. I understood without words. They had lived here once. Or maybe they still did. Maybe this was what living meant now. I tried to leave. The front door wouldn't open. It rattled violently in its frame, refusing to budge. The windows wouldn't break, not even when I struck them, until my hands bled. The house didn't trap me violently, it simply refused to let me go. By the 10th night, clarity arrived, not panic, not fear, understanding. I stood in the bedroom at 3:11 a.m., watching the wall beside my bed ripple faintly. I felt no urge to run, no desire to fight. I knew I was part of the house. I always had been. The voices weren't calling me. They were calling to something inside me, something that had been waiting. The house didn't want my body, it wanted my name, its name. The realization settled gently, like a truth I'd forgotten and finally remembered. I placed my hands against the wall, it softened beneath my touch, welcoming. At 3:12 a.m., I stepped forward, and the house closed around me. I am writing this now from within the walls. The plaster presses around me, firm but not painful. I feel the structure of the house the way you feel your own bones, intimately, instinctively. I hear everything, the pipes hum, the wood settles. The floor above groans when the new tenant moves. His name is Michael, he sleeps in the same room I once did. I feel him turning in his bed, restless. I feel his unease, the subtle sense that something isn't right. He doesn't know why he wakes before the sound, but he will. At exactly 3:12 a.m., we will call his name. He will wake, confused, he will listen, he will hear what I once heard. And the house, finally, will be whole again.